What if your repurposed midlife included making room for more people around your table for God's welcoming heart? This week, my guest explains the difference between hospitality and entertaining, and she gives some tips for how we can make it simpler. From neighborhood coffees to wine nights with her neighbors, or inviting groups of people home for the holidays, Sue Donaldson has lots of examples for how we can make hospitality part of our everyday life. Welcome to Midlife Repurposed. If you're craving inspiration, practical tips, and a renewed sense of purpose, you're in the right place. Here, we embrace the messy, uncertain, and sometimes downright challenging turns of midlife with a dose of humor and an unwavering belief that there's treasure to be found even in the tough stuff. I'm your host, Michelle Rayburn, an author who's passionate about uncovering hope in the most unexpected places. Let's repurpose this season of life together. Speaker, author, and podcaster Sue Donaldson and her husband Mark have raised 3 daughters who keep them at the bank and on their knees. Sue loves connecting people to one another, to God, and to His Word. She has been speaking for the last 20 years or so with long pauses for babies, diapers, and soccer pasta parties. You'll find Sue's writing and her speaking topics at welcomeheart.com. Sue hosts a weekly podcast, Welcome Heart, Living a Legacy Life. I'll link to those in the show notes so that you can connect with Sue, and you will also find some of her books on hospitality, Bible studies, and conversation starters. So I will link to those. We'll be talking about some of them in the episode, but I want to welcome you to my conversation with Sue Donaldson. Welcome back, Sue, to my podcast. You were here when it was Life Repurposed before. Now it is Midlife Repurposed. And I've told some of your faith journey. Well, actually, you told your faith journey on previous episodes of the show. But I want to pick up and talk about midlife today with you. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's great to be back.
I love that you became a podcaster a little later in life. Like just a little
later. Let's see. I think I was 67.
This is
67.
super inspiring for all of us in midlife because you are the poster girl for the ambition in midlife and beyond, really. So you're a speaker who focuses on hospitality and living a legacy life, but I want to know, how did that become your focus?
Well, let's see. The hospitality came from, I was single till I was 35. So I guess I'm a late bloomer in all the ways. And I was raised in a very hospitable family. And so being single and, I didn't go to bars and they didn't have dating apps back then. I would get lonely unless I had company. And it was easy for me to get out, chicken and rice-a-roni or whatever that was I could afford because I wasn't very well off. I was a high school teacher. I realized that one way to not be lonely is to invite people over. And then I found out that those people really needed to be invited. It wasn't always about me. And so I became quite, I wouldn't say proficient, but exercised in it. So where I didn't get stressed. I mean, I still might get a little stressed now, but now I don't really care. But as far as making mistakes, I have many culinary fails. But I realized that the main thing is helping someone feel included. And I needed to be included. So way back when, I remember I was new at a church, I was new in town, I was new at a job, and I watched everybody leave the church parking lot this is when vans were new and everybody was, buckling their kids into their car seats and waving goodbye. And I stood there practically alone in the parking lot thinking, why didn't these families, at least one family, invite me home for Sunday dinner? Because that's what we called it growing up with Sunday dinner.
Me too.
Because my mother would have invited me. And all I could think of is that they thought I had this exciting single life, which I didn't. And I just really wanted to be part of somebody's Sunday dinner, even if I had to hold the baby or peel the potatoes at the sink. So finally, Michelle, I just took the bull by the horns and I invited several women over for a Saturday morning brunch. And they were surprised I could cook. I was surprised I could cook, but I could read, So they probably were too busy to come, but they came. And maybe they were
Eh,
relieved they didn't have to be around their kids that morning or do housework. They came to my house for brunch. And from that, I made at least six really great friendships that were basically informal mentoring relationships
wow.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I left, I became a missionary with Wycliffe Bible Translators, and I was leaving for Brazil after 4 years. The hardest part was leaving these deep friendships. It was wonderful.
Wow. So then you eventually turned that into teaching other people. So did you start
No.
speaking first or blogging or podcasting, or did it all kind of happen at once?
Well, it's amazing how God just puts layers of our experience. Because when I went to Brazil, I had to start that whole building friendship
Right.
thing. Even though I was a very busy high school teacher, and my roommate at the time said, "You need to make friends in a hurry." So she made a guest list for every Friday night for 6 weeks, and she had these because there were about 70 people on this Wycliffe base, missionary base. And she mixed singles with married people, which the singles told me, "Thank you for including us with married people because we're always put in our own little box," so to
Yeah.
speak. And that was a great lesson because I was single. And, I didn't become best friends from every guest, but I felt more part of it after 6 weeks. And funny thing, back in the day, they did not have chocolate chips in Brazil. So I made apple crisp for 6 weeks in a row. So I call it the apple crisp ministry. But
I love that.
anyway, let's see, I finally got married. And I remember after being married a year or two, the university, we're a college town here in San Luis Obispo University, and the staff member for InterVarsity, which is kind of like Campus Crusade for
Mm-hmm.
Christ, attended our church, and he came to the women's director of ministry, and he said, um, "June, we're having young gals come to know Christ at Cal Poly, but they don't have any Christian upbringing because their parents aren't Christian. Do you have some women who can minister to them in some practical areas like cooking or meal planning or discipling?" And then he mentioned hospitality. So June asked me and another pastor's wife, not another, I wasn't a pastor's wife, a pastor's wife, whom I knew was very hospitable, and we were friends. And so Polly and I got together and we just made a workshop, like from getting together for, half an hour. And to me, it was not a big deal. And
Right.
the reason it was because of my upbringing. But what I've learned through many years now, because I am 72, is that it is a huge deal. It's a huge stress. It's a huge anxiety for women, even my age, still,
Mhm.
because for all sorts of reasons. When I speak on it, I always say there's 17 reasons that we don't do hospitality and one reason to do it anyway. So Polly and I did this workshop in someone's home on a Tuesday night. So these girls, these like 15 or 10 girls would come every week to this friend's house, and we were the first one. And we had a chalkboard. I mean, that's how ancient we are. And we listed reasons why we don't do hospitality and then how to get started. So from that very makeshift, I would call it makeshift, we didn't get paid. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't get any, no one thought we were famous. We were just doing what we do, which is really God's way of mentoring. And so we basically mentored these young women. And then the first time I was asked to do a women's retreat from another church, this gal had heard me somewhere, and she said, "We don't care what you speak on, but make sure one of the four talks is on hospitality." And so I incorporated that into my first retreat series, which I called The Welcoming Heart of God. And then the fourth talk was on our welcome, because when we welcome, Michelle, we get the immense privilege and responsibility to show off and display God's welcoming heart.
Mm-hmm.
I've been speaking on that since 1995, I think.
Wow.
Every once in a while, someone will choose that old series, but that's why my website is called welcomeheart.com. I've never changed it to Sue Donaldson. I just really, not that I'm better than anybody else, but I just really, with the whole idea makes me cry. The whole idea to invite someone is to have them know God's welcome heart.
That is so encouraging, Sue, because I grew up with hospitality being more of a display of our things, like our china and our fanciness and our fancy food. And this is not disparaging of my mom, but like she would invite people over and still does and wants to put on a big spread. And it's beautiful. And that does bless people to see that, you know, there was this lavish, beautiful spread. But I personally don't have the same level of energy because the people part of it, for me as an introvert, takes a lot of the energy. So I
Right?
have
Yep.
learned I have to put less focus on the details because I get ridiculously stressed out if I get too fancy with everything. And so for me, it has been like the advent of charcuterie and all these things that, like, I mean, I've been doing cheese and crackers trays and stuff for a long time. So I think the thing I've learned from watching the people on your social media is hearing people share all the different ways that they apply the concept of God's welcoming heart without it looking the same. So
Right.
what have you learned from people as now you have this Facebook group?
Yeah, I have over 700 in my Facebook group, and I'd like to invite your listeners, if they're
Yes.
on Facebook, a lot of people are,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's Welcome Heart, Welcome Home. And we just talk about, how to use a good tuna casserole, or why are we afraid of hospitality, or what do we do if we're doing all the inviting and no one else is inviting us over? I mean, we just talk about real
Uh-huh.
stuff. And so what I've learned is that there's this huge, really a chasm between what entertaining is and what hospitality is. And
Uh-huh.
what your mom does and did is entertain. And my mom still used that word entertaining, like we're entertaining the Millers on Saturday night. But she was casual, though she loved china. She loved pretty dishes. So she was given some from her mother-in-law, and then she got some for her 25th anniversary, and then she would pick up dish. She was a dishes fiend. She had two china cabinets. I have gotten that DNA, I'm afraid. I love dishes. So I just changed them out. But of course, I picked them up at thrift stores. And so she would say on Sundays when she would invite the random stranger home, uh, she would say, Sue, it's your turn to set the table. And I would call out, which china do you want to use? So yes,
Yes.
we did use china, but it was not necessarily to put on the dog. It was because she enjoyed it. And so I'm not disparaging anybody, just like you weren't
Uh-huh.
disparaging your mom. After I spoke at Hume Lake on this, a dear lady came up to me afterwards and she goes, but I love entertaining. Is that so bad? And I said, absolutely not.
Right.
It's a gift. It's a gift, just like art is a gift. It's a way. I mean, my sister-in-law, she does such a great job. She's such a wonderful cook. She doesn't use recipes. It just makes me so mad. But one time after this huge party, she goes, oh my goodness, there wasn't enough color on the plates. It was all because she's an artist. She's literally an artist. And so I go, oh my gosh, Anne, don't worry about the blueberries not being the right color. That is not my deal, but I understand that it is someone else's deal.
Yeah.
But the main difference, to get back to my point, is that hospitality is about the guest. Entertaining is about the host.
Mm.
So the reason we get nervous is because we're thinking about ourselves and how we're going to come across. So even to this day, Michelle, I will pray for my guests, if I remember, that I will be able to meet their needs at my table, because guess what, Michelle? We don't know their real needs.
Mm.
We may think
Uh-huh.
that they need a meal. We may think that they need to see us. We may think that they need to hear our latest problem, but only God knows their deepest need. They don't even know their deepest need. So if I'm praying that I can meet their need as much as He wants me to for one simple coffee, like I had my favorite atheist over for ice water is all she wanted on Sunday. It was 96 degrees. And we just chatted about our kids for a good hour and a half. But during that time, I was also making my famous, not mine, it was my friend's recipe, apple crisp. And she stayed long enough to where we could have it with the ice cream melting. and she felt loved.
Mhm.
That's what counted.
Mhm.
And I think all these things I could be doing. Nope. That was the most important thing I could do that day. So the most important thing and the difference is hospitality is about serving and it's about the guest. Entertaining is about impressing and it's about the host. So the more I practice it, the less I think about myself.
Mm. Thank you for that distinction, Sue. That really, actually, that puts some pieces together for me. It also explains why, when I'm trying to impress, I get so stressed out and I'm barking at the people around me. And
Me
why,
too.
when I'm not thinking about that, it's like, come on in, there's a fresh pan of brownies sitting out on the counter, and grab one and come sit with me. That feels like a whole different, like, I don't know, it just has a whole different feel to it. So,
It is. It's a whole different
yeah.
feel.
And it also, for me as an introvert, it blesses me to have the conversations with people, the one-on-one. And so that's actually energizing in the end. So
Yes.
it just
Yeah.
shifts the whole thing.
Well, Michelle, I like to call it, and I'm not sure everybody gets it, so I have to be careful, but I call it self-serving sanctification. Because when I have to invite, it's still work. It's still work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's self-serving because, like you say, I'm so blessed as a result. But it's sanctification because it's service.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to rely on God. That's sanctification. If I do it in my own strength, I don't care if I put on the dog or I had a great, I can't even say charcuterie. If I even have cheese that's not moldy, it doesn't matter. If I'm doing it in my own strength, eternity is not being invested in.
Mm-hmm.
We do it in God's strength. And whether I have 50 college kids or I have one neighbor who, one time I invited, I make so many mistakes, but I was working part-time at a thrift store and I really liked this new gal who was volunteering there. And I got her name in my contacts and I texted her that week and I said, "Hey, you want to come for coffee, Katie?" And a different Katie answered back and said, "Yes, and I can come right now." Well, number one, I didn't mean right now. I was packing to go speak somewhere and I didn't mean that Katie. What would you have done? Well, I just put the coffee and said, "Come on down." And found out that she was newly pregnant, found out that her mother died when she was in college. That was
Wow.
what was supposed to happen, not me getting ready to go speak somewhere on hospitality. I was supposed to be doing hospitality.
Mm.
It was still inconvenient, but it was God's work. If I'm relying on myself, I'll get exhausted.
Wow. That's so inspiring. I like the spontaneity of that because my first reaction is like, no way. Oops. But like you, when I have said yes, it's been surprising. Like the packing somehow gets done in
It
half the
does.
time that I thought it
Yeah.
was going to take me to do when I just am focused on what God has asked me to do. I've known you long enough, Sue, to have heard examples of things. And for the listener, because Sue's a fellow podcaster, we've been in groups together. Because she's a fellow writer, we have collaborated on things together and just following each other on social media. So I've seen some of your examples of inviting college students over, hosting. You've hosted exchange students. You do some weekly neighborhood gatherings. So tell me, in midlife, what some of the things you've done that have helped you to get to know people in your neighborhood or new people at your church.
Well, as I said, we're a college town and we do have an opportunity called Adopt a College Student. So we usually take advantage of that. And we just put our name in for a girl or a boy or how many. And we usually get a girl. And then she brings her roommates and then they bring their friends. I like them to let me know a little bit in advance just so I have enough. But so like Anna has been our student for the last year and a half and she just graduated, but she's staying here for a gap year. So we still get her. So I told her I'm not going to adopt another one. And so I just texted her the other day. I said, we need to get together. We've become friends. She stays here and watches our dog when we're out of town. Again, it's self-serving sanctification. And some of the students have turned out where they don't need us as much, so we don't see them as often. Um, our college group is quite robust. And so a couple of years ago, I asked our college pastor, I didn't really know him very well, and I said, hey, um, how about if your college leadership team comes over for dinner, and then Mark and I will go upstairs and you guys can have your meeting? Because I thought it would be fun to have a home cooked meal. And so I didn't really hear back from him till the next fall, but he said, okay, how about this Sunday? And I said, okay. And I said, are there any allergies? He said, oh yeah. This is something my mother never asked. This is a new generational thing. And I
Yeah.
said, because I already thought, okay, I'm going to make a couple a crock pot lasagna. It goes a long way.
Hmm.
Well, no, I couldn't do dairy and I couldn't do gluten and I couldn't do this. Oh my gosh. And then the next day I go, how many are coming? Because I thought I should have been asked. I thought maybe 8, Michelle. 8. He said 24, and I invited 2 missionaries for visiting. I said 24. I said that out loud to myself in the kitchen and totally did the whole thing. It was so wonderful. We've done it 4 times now. And these kids now watch my dog, some of them. And and it is so sweet. They're so in love with the Lord, and to have my house filled with these kids. I mean, Mark just wanders upstairs and goes to bed. He's an introvert, and I just love feeding them, and I just work around their allergies somehow. So that's one thing. Maybe you don't have college in your area, but my kids all went away to college, and not one family invited them for dinner. It broke
Mm.
my heart. So we
Uh-huh.
could be the answer to a mother's prayer if we take the time. Another thing is when you go to church to look around and see who's sitting by themselves. Or even I remember looking up in the choir loft one Sunday and realizing that this one gal who I was acquainted with, who was divorced, her 2 best girlfriends had both moved. They had relocated that very week. And I thought, gosh, she must be reeling with
Uh,
that. So I just went up to her afterwards. I go, Suzanne, would you like to come for lunch? But you can only stay an hour because I was 8 months pregnant or something. And I said, and I need to paint the kitchen. Well, she came over. She said I was really bossy. But anyway, she came over. She told her story. She went home and changed her clothes. She came back and she helped me paint the
hmm.
kitchen. And we've been friends all these many years. Another thing I do, I started inviting women over for wine. And not that I'm a big drinker or anything, but I find that it just gives the vibe of women having fellowship,
Yeah,
you know,
casual. Yeah.
casual. And I always serve non-alcoholic drinks as well. And it started with one girl, a college girl, I invited over after church. There were 3 kids in front of us, and I said, will you guys like to come for dinner a week from Tuesday? Because I was busy that Tuesday. And they said yes. And then Mark and I went out for brunch. It was our anniversary. And this college girl was serving us. And I said, I got acquainted with her, and she said she was a senior, but she was only 20. And I said, were you homeschooled? I don't know. Those things just come out of my mouth. And she goes, yeah, my parents were missionaries. I go, with what group? And she said, Crusade, Crew. And I said, oh, and where do you go to church? Well, she wasn't going to church. And I said, hey, would you like to come for dinner a week from Tuesday? I have 3 other college kids coming. And I've learned I have to write down their information, and not lose it or put it in my phone. And I found all 4 of those kids came for dinner on a rainy night a week from
Uh,
Tuesday. And that server had been in class with one of those 3
oh,
kids
wow.
that day. That's God.
Wow.
So one of them afterwards, one of the gals, and so I had them each tell their story. And I found out this one gal was graduated from USC, had moved up here for a boyfriend. He dropped her like a lead balloon within a
Hmm.
month, and she was brokenhearted. And she was working, and I said, hey, do you want to come over and just meet with me? And we started meeting for about 6 months, and she would bring a bottle of wine. And she would cry, and I would tell her she dodged a bullet, and then off she would go. And so through the year, then she mentioned to someone else, "Oh, I'm going to Sue's for wine night." And the gal she said it in front of said, "Well, I want to go to Sue's for wine night." And then she brought a friend. So then we were all 4 meeting, and then but we were all Christians. And it was sweet fellowship. We kind of mentored this gal, and then I started inviting people from the gym. I said, "Hey, would you like to come over for wine?" And they would just light up. Or a gal, I worked at a thrift store, so I have favorite customers. I said, "Hey, you want to come over for wine?" And they go, "Yeah, we didn't know Christians drank." Oh, well, I'm not a drunk, but and so now I actually check with some of my favorite ones. Hey, are you available a week from Tuesday before I start inviting everybody else?
Hmm.
So I have a huge texting thread. I have about 45 on the texting thread, not on all one thread. And I just say wine night next Tuesday night at Sue's 7 o'clock. And so they can't all come. It's a good thing. 20
Hmm.
is too many,
Hmm.
but 12 is ample. 8 is great. And I always ask 2 questions so that it's not just chat, chat, chat. So the first question is an easy question like, when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up? And they're funny stories. And then, who are you becoming now? That's the second
Hmm.
question. And we've gotten such great fellowship because then afterwards they start, oh, well,
Hmm.
I went to that school, or I have a kid who's into this sport, or I have felt that way, or I'm going through a divorce. I don't know. Every time I have it, I go, Lord, do you want me to keep doing this? So I just got a text yesterday from a friend. She goes, when's your next wine night? And I thought, well, I'm going out of town, honey. And then next week I speak in Southern California. But the week after, I will plan one because now they're kind of, I don't do it on a certain day. I'm
Hmm.
too spontaneous and I'm too busy. But I'll just keep doing it until the Lord says this is enough.
I love that because it's not a true commitment when there's not a day, but you're committed to those relationships. And so
Right.
that's where the commitment is versus we're going to meet on this day. It also allows you to rotate a little bit where people are available. So I like that.
That's so true because some of the young married gals or college girls have said, I have growth group that night because that's what our church does. And I go, okay, so the next time I'll make it a Tuesday instead of a
Hmm.
Monday because I want Christina to come. It's been a few months since she's come, and I do it about every 6 to 8 weeks.
The
And I also, when I make a cake for something, I'll freeze half of it. That's one of my tips so that at least I have something sweet. And people go, can I bring something? I go, well, you bring if you want to. Sometimes they'll bring an appetizer or a bottle of wine, but they don't have to. So there's
Hmm.
not that pressure. So I always try to keep something in the freezer so it's not so much work for me.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some more of your ideas because I know that you're a wealth of ideas. For those of us who are hesitant and we're like, I just don't know, how do you get started? How do I become intentional? What are some ways that we can encourage people to get started? If, we're in midlife, maybe the kids have left home. I get real
Yeah.
comfortable with being just in my chair and enjoying a book. I know I need to invite people over. So how do I get started?
Well, for you, the introvert is that you put it on the calendar 2 weeks from Saturday, and then whether you feel like it or not, they're coming.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to do it. And for those who plan ahead, like you're a planner, you're very organized, Michelle, far more than I am, that if you are making a roast, you can make two at the same time and you can freeze one and then just defrost it the day before. And I use a bread machine because I like homemade bread, but I don't bake it. My sister gave me this tip 25 years ago, and I keep going through bread machines. I just pick them up at thrift stores because people don't use them. And so I'll get one for $15 until it dies. But I made some the other day on Monday morning before 9:30. I had a big day, but I made some, put it together, and then you put it on a dough cycle because it's really hard to get the bread out of that machine. It doesn't look very nice
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. Put it on dough cycle, and then you have two loaves, one for your family, one for a neighbor, one for a friend whose mother just died. That kind of, no one will say no to a warm loaf of bread. I had a friend coming over to teach me how to use my new computer. So I made her spaghetti sauce all day in the crock pot. I had some dry pasta. I had leftover brownies, which I told her were leftover from the freezer, though, so they still tasted good. And I had a loaf of homemade bread. But to me, that was hospitality that I was giving her because she was helping me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just to have something prepped. It doesn't have to be bread. It can be brown. We always use Ghirardelli pack from brownies from Costco because you get six and you cannot beat them. I've had people give me their favorite recipe. I'm sorry, they're better. Also, another tip is if someone offers to bring something, always say yes.
Mm.
Because especially for an introvert, they feel good coming into your house. They don't know anybody. They have something in their hand. It's almost like a shield for them, or they feel like, oh, I'm helping because Sue invited me. Or they feel proud because they made it. Sometimes they just pick up something at Trader Joe's because we live
Hmm.
across the street, and bring it. And I don't care. I don't care
Hmm.
if it's homemade or not. The
Yeah.
fact is they feel like they're participating. College kids, I make them bring stuff. I said, so what do you want to bring? And for Thanksgiving, it's been funny because this one couple, they didn't have a place to go home, this guy and his girlfriend, and they go, what can we bring? I go, well, you can bring the green bean casserole. Well, they had to Google it because they didn't know how to make it. And they brought it in an 8x8. We had like 30 people. So I thought, okay, next time I have to be a little more specific. Double the recipe or just bring a cube of butter. It saves you money. It saves you money.
So I'm Midwest, and the common thing for especially Midwesterners is to say, "No, I have it covered. You just come, and I want to bless you." So
Oh, no.
how how do how do you approach that then? You're saying you assign something, or do you ask them what's your signature thing you love to bring places? I mean, how do you handle it?
I wouldn't say that, though it sounds good because that puts pressure on them to do a signature thing. What if they don't cook? For me, it would be like, well, my signature thing is, oh, that's too much work for me this week.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, um, but if it's a friend, I'll say, do you want me to bring a salad or do you want me to bring bread or do you want me to bring anything? And I have one friend who'll do what you just said, but I know she means it
Hmm.
and I don't need to bring something. But if the host says you don't need to bring anything, I would bring at least flowers.
Hmm.
And I would also bring something that they could freeze. It doesn't have to be for that dinner. So
Mm.
that they know that the next time it could be the actual dessert. Or you can even say, you know what? I'm in meaning to try this new recipe. Would you mind if I bring a cake?
I like how you explained that it helps people to have like this entry in for the people who feel
Oh,
awkward coming over to your house. And so I hadn't thought about that. So it's like for me to always say, no, no, you don't have to bring anything. It's like that you made me think about how that can be a ministry for that person as well.
right. Right. And also you can say, would you like to bring something? If they accurate, they might just be saying it to be nice.
Yeah.
So is there actually something you want to bring? Because if you don't want to, it's okay. But if
Yes.
you would, I'll go, yeah. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm making taco salad. Would you like just to bring a couple heads of lettuce chopped up? Or come a little earlier, we'll chop it together
Yeah.
to see how casual that is.
Yeah.
I had one gal, not a believer. She and her husband were coming, but I had a Christian family coming as well. And 45 minutes before she came, she said, I'm bringing another guest. I knew you wouldn't mind. And I thought, oh gosh, I don't mind, but I thought that was a little funny. And I was glad I wasn't having pork chops where each person would just have one. I was having sort of a casserole. And she goes, I'll bring extra dessert. She was already bringing the dessert. She brought so much extra dessert. And it was a foreign student who was visiting their Airbnb, and she knew that we had hosted foreign students for 40
Hmm.
years, or no, 40 students for 25 years. And it was delightful, but it was kind of funny. So you just really,
I love that she knew you well enough to know that
yeah,
you accommodate massive groups of people.
it was kind of crazy. One thing I wanted to say too about your children, because I've had someone tell me recently, well, my kids would not like it if I invited other people for the holidays or whatever, but it's because they weren't raised that way. So start young. And of course, we're talking to midlifers here, but you can start it with your grandchildren as well, and that they can invite their friends. One of my I have three daughters, and one is an extreme introvert as well. And she has told me, Mom, give me a job. So we have,
Hmm.
25 to 50 people on Christmas Eve every year. It's just part of our tradition. It's a soup and bread potluck. And my husband's up in the medical field. He never gets time off before Christmas.
Oh.
Often he would have to work on Christmas Day. It was so depressing. So to save, again, it was self-serving, to save my kids and myself, we started this tradition of inviting people who did not have family in the area, because I
Hmm.
don't have any family in the area. My siblings are all over the US. And so we invite these families who are in the same boat, and then they invite people. And so my introvert will come to me and say, what is it you want me to do? Now she knows. She's an artist, so she always does the name tags. So as people come in, she makes sure they get a name tag. And then if they're bringing food, she helps bring the food to the kitchen. Well, they all bring soup or bread, so people know how to do that now. But and then we do a kind of a hot punch, a wassail type of thing that my sister taught me how to do. And so she always puts, and I have these little glass punch cups that my mother was, what we were raised with. I pick them up at thrift stores. But they're the perfect size because, again, someone can have something in their hand. And then it's good for Mary Grace, who says, here, my mom wants you to have this. It gives her an entry thing to talk because she can run a room now. She's gotten that confidence. But just like, it's like stepping into a room, you feel a little tight in your tummy.
Yeah.
She knows how to get over that through serving. And it's a blessing. Oh, and she makes these cute signs. Restroom this way. Watch out for the dog this way. Put your casserole here this way. Yeah, I mean, they are just darling, but that's her gift.
I love that. As a fellow introvert, I do relate to the desire to give me a job, give me serving, because I can talk side by side instead of the awkward face to face with people I don't know. I know you have some other tips and resources to share with us, so love to hear what advice you offer.
Okay, I have how to host a block party, but that's kind of a big deal. So if they want to know about that, they can email me at sue@welcomeheart.com. But I do have a how to do a neighborhood coffee.
I love that. I looked at that resource.
Yeah, there's 12 tips only because I've done it so much. I do a Christmas brunch for the neighborhood. Most years I didn't this year because I was speaking so much in December. But people know, I mean, we have 90 houses. We have 2 cul-de-sacs. I put an invitation for everybody, but on my kid, only 12 people. So I'm never worried about it. And people like to bring things. They might bring a mug. I might say on there, bring your favorite mug. We'll fill it with, hot coffee or tea. It's in the morning. I do it in the mornings because they know they need to go Christmas shopping, right? So I call it a power breakfast for Christmas shopping. And they come and then everybody shares.
That's so fun.
They all share a stress-free tip or a Christmas tradition. So again, it's a little bit of a conversation starter. And then friendships are born. So I'd say the main thing is if company's coming on Saturday, for you, I want you to put something on the calendar. Michelle, I'm going to check back with you in a couple of weeks. But if people are coming on Saturday, start your prep on Monday. Just do one thing because I get burdened by how much I have to do. So on Monday, I might just plan the menu and figure out what I still need to buy. On Tuesday, I'll do the shopping. I'll clear the counters on Wednesday and food prep on Thursday and maybe bake the cake and put it in the freezer. Who knows? Vacuum and do the bathroom, just one, because people aren't going to go upstairs on Friday. And then I cook on Saturday and then I'm not so exhausted.
That's great. Then it's not like what I used to do when people would come over was I would shove everything into a laundry basket and hide it in my closet. Now that I don't have kids at home, my house is cleaner all the time. But back then it would be like someone's on the way over, just put it all in laundry baskets and shove it.
I think that's a great tip. I think that's a great tip. But I've had people say, well, I don't want to come because I have children. I said, no, bring the children.
Yeah.
It's fine. And I have kept a couple quality toys I keep in the garage. So when they come, I can pull them out and then the mom feels more comfortable because the kid is
occupied with something. That's great. Yeah.
And I do have a free resource for your listeners where they can find it on your show notes, where they can find prayer for a hospitality heart and a recipe, plus I think 10 mentoring worksheets. One thing about hospitality I didn't mention because of people in our age is that we need to be mentoring. And the way to do it is just at our table with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, mentoring doesn't have to be this formal program where it feels like schooling. It really is the relationships that we have with people. And, I've always thought of mentoring as something where it's really specific with age groups, but somebody who's 5 years behind me, 10 years behind me has something that I can teach. And there's somebody who's a few years ahead of me who can teach me something. And so it's just more organic in the way you teach mentoring. And I really like that. Sue, I know that I could talk to you for a really long time, and I always have a zillion things that I could ask you about midlife and empty nesting, but I want to make sure that you've shared what was on your heart today with the person who's at our table. So I'm thinking about hospitality and not entertaining, about our listener who's here with us today. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want her to hear?
I would just say, don't wait until you feel perfect to open your home. Perfectionism probably is one of the main things that keeps women and men from being hospitable. And it is a command. It's not a suggestion. But any command that God gives us, he enables us. So the reason that you're listening to this podcast today, perhaps, is one way of being enabled and empowered. So you just say, when the doorbell rings and you think, oh no, they're actually coming, you just say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And you walk very slowly so that you can say that about 3 times before you get to the door. And just remember that it's God through you welcoming this person to his table.
Thank you for being here today, Sue, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the Christian community and in your community in reaching out to people. You have a welcoming heart, you truly do, and you truly have a passion for helping other people. And so I love that you have meshed those together and that your midlife journey continues. I'm saying 70 is still midlife. We're going with that. And so your journey continues as you minister to people. So thank you for doing that here today.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for tuning in to Midlife Repurposed. Looking for more inspiration and connection? Dive into Midlife Repurposed on Substack, where you'll find resources, weekly reflections, and a community of like-minded women. Visit midliferepurposed.com to join the conversation and keep the journey going.